Hi, everyone. Welcome to Voices of Western, the Humans of Western podcast.
This is where we delve into everyday stories of students, staff, and faculty on campus.
Be sure to check us out on Instagram at humans_Western.
You can also find us on TikTok, YouTube, and our Facebook page, Humans of Western. My name is Zainab.
And I'm Kevin. Today's episode features Jan Cami, a professor in the Department of Physics and Astronomy here at Western. His research involves astronomical observations to study the surroundings of dying stars and the interstellar medium. And he is part of large international collaborations, including researchers from NASA.
He also taught and is teaching multiple undergraduate and graduate courses here at Western. You may recognize him if you've taken the famous first-year Physics for the Sciences course.
Professor Cami's journey to where he is now is one that we loved listening to and gained much wisdom from.
From deciding his career path with a coin flip, chasing his passions, to working towards making an impact through his students and research. Our talk with Prof. Cami left us inspired. We hope you enjoy it as well.
Voices of Western listeners, we have a very special guest today. We have Professor Jan Cami. He's a professor in the Department of Physics and Astronomy here at Western. And I see on your page, it says you study large molecules in the interstellar medium around dying stars. Maybe you can kind of give the listeners a little bit of introduction for yourself as well.
All right, sure. Well, thanks for having me. So, yes, my name is Jan Cami. Since I was a little kid, I wanted to be an astronomer when I grew up. That's what I would actually answer. And I still want to be an astronomer when I grow up. And so, in that sense, I think I have like a dream job. Doing astronomy, I do astronomy research, but I also do teaching, mostly in physics the last few years. And I also like to do a lot of outreach. So I run the Cronin Observatory on campus. I also actually organize Science Rendezvous, which is a big science festival on campus that this year will be on May 7. I'm also the Associate Director for Research and Outreach of Western Space, so the Institute for Earth and Space Exploration. And so my path here was long and windy, and when I was a student, I would have never guessed that this is where I would end up. So I wanted to do astronomy. I studied physics. After actually in high school, my focus was on classical languages and philosophy, so Latin and Greek philosophy.
Cool.
I did one prep year of math and then did my physics degree. And the problem, so I'm originally from Belgium, and then the problem once I got my degree was that there was no real option to actually do graduate studies in astronomy. And so, I had no backup plan. So my entire life I was like, I'm going to be an astronomer, and then suddenly this was like a dead end, and I had no backup plan. And so it took a while, but then I learned about this opportunity to do a European master's program in astronomy and astrophysics, which required half a year of courses and exams in Portugal. And then the second half of the year was a research project that could be essentially anywhere in Europe. And my first thought was like, nope, I'm not going to leave Belgium. I had a very active social life, loved my family, friends, was the president of the student association. I kind of was in a choir and stuff. So I like, no, I'm not leaving. But I was like, it's astronomy. So I was like, you know what? I'll just do this. It's a short while. It's going to be a great experience. I'll do this one more year of astronomy, and I'll find a real job after that. So I went to Portugal. Loved the experience. It was great. Also, very hefty in terms of studying. So it was graduate level courses, but you typically had one course per week. And so we had classes 6 days out of 7, so including on Saturday.
Wow.
You had to kind of work the entire time just to kind of keep up with the material. And then we had exams. We had 10 graduate exams in 1 week, so I had 4 exams on
God.
Monday and 4 on Friday. So I mean, that's essentially, I think, where I learned almost all the astrophysics that I know. And then for the research project, what I thought was the most interesting research project was at the Leiden Observatory to study large interstellar molecules in space. But there were 2 of us in the class that wanted to have that project, and so only one of us could have it. And so literally it was decided by a coin flip. And so I was the lucky one, so I could do this project. So that was
How long ago was that?
That was in '96. So it's been a while.
Oh, wow.
So coin flip decided both of yours like life trajectory a little bit there.
That's right. Yeah. And so I did that project. While I was doing that project, I got offered to do a PhD in the Netherlands, in a different city in the north of the Netherlands. So half between that city and Amsterdam. So I was like, well, great, it's going to be 4 more years in astronomy, and then I'll find a real job after that.
A real job. I love how you say that.
Well, because for me, doing astronomy was like a dream job, right? So I mean, that for me, this whole idea that you could actually be paid for doing astronomy was like so absurd to me. And when I was a grad student, I got my first paycheck. It was 512 Dutch guilders, so it's about $250 or so. I was like, yes, I'm living the dream. I'm being paid for astronomy. But then, I very quickly figured out like that's actually not enough to pay the rent. So later, but so that was my plan. And then, 4 years actually became 6 years, my PhD. And then while I was finishing my PhD, there was one of the professors that actually just arrived. He came from the US, from California, where he worked for NASA. And so he actually told me that somebody at NASA was doing the sort of research that I was interested in. And so I was like, that would be nice. So I wrote a proposal to get a fellowship from the National Research Council in the US to go to NASA and do the research that I actually enjoyed doing. And sure enough, I got it. And so, the day I left to the US, and by the way, I had never been in the US before, so I decided to move to a country I'd never been in before. I told my mom, like, look, yeah, I'm going to be gone for 2 years, and then I'll get a real job. And then 2 years became almost 5 years in California.
Wow.
And then, so my better half is also professor here actually at Western. So we were both postdocs working for NASA. But it was harder and harder to actually get funding. And one of the reasons was that back then President Bush had decided, like, NASA should focus on getting us back to the moon. And so as a consequence, the science budget were cut in half. And so we were both always competing for the same pots of money. And it's from those research grants that we also had to kind of pay our own salary and stuff. So that actually became harder and harder. Plus we were foreign nationals in the US, which is always a little bit risky. And so, we decided to kind of apply for all sorts of positions because, astronomy is a small field. The chances that you find a job together at the same place at the same time are very small. And so, we applied at various places, got some job offers here and there, but never two within a workable distance. And then, she saw this job here at Western for a tenure track position. So she asked whether I was interested to move to Canada, to which I eloquently responded, hell no. Because compared to California, where living is like really easy, right? I mean, you don't have to worry about weather and that sort of things. Like, nope, I don't think so. But, she applied anyway. She got the job offer. And then it turns out that Western had this plan for spousal appointments, where some universities realize that it's maybe not unusual that people who study together and are passionate about science maybe kind of also get along well and stuff, right? And so there was a spousal appointment procedure. So it essentially meant that I got a 5-year position with no guarantee for an extension and floor level salary and that sort of things. But it was a job, and then over time managed to convert it into a permanent position. And so we moved from California to Western here in December 2006. So moving from California to Canada in winter was probably not the smartest thing we've ever done. So it was a bit of a shock. But yeah, so since then we've been here.
I love that story so much. It's such like you went to so many different places and did so many like different things. That's amazing.
It's a bit the thing that so academia is tough sometimes. There's a few things I like about academia. There's a lot of things I kind of don't like. And some of the things I don't like is that a lot of the connections that you make with people are temporary. As a grad student, we had good friends, and then everybody moves to a different part of the world, and you start losing those friendships, and so that sort of things is difficult. And then if you want to go for position as professor, I mean, you know, something's got to give. You have to make some, you have to do some compromises. And so for us, the compromise was that we couldn't go back to Europe essentially to get a job there. So, you know, we're living very far away from our family and our friends, and so you know, sometimes that's difficult.
For sure.
Until the pandemic, we were actually able to travel frequently back and see our friends, so that was good. So in that sense, the pandemic was really tough for me, but yeah, it's kind of how it goes, I guess.
I was gonna ask, what did your mom say about your terrible time estimation?
Well, I mean, it took a while, and so in Belgium, people don't really move away very far. So I have three brothers, and they live all within like 10 kilometers from, you know, the house where I grew up.
Right.
So everybody lives nearby, and you know, people don't move away very much. So for her, that was really hard. But then at the same time, you know, she also understands that you know, I do the job that I wanted to do, and I'm good at it, and so as long as I can stay in touch and kind of go back to Belgium regularly, I think she's okay with that.
Yeah, no, that's great that your mom's very supportive in that. Because I was gonna say, you, in terms of the career that you're in, working in the space field, you're already in a very select, very like niche category of people in the whole world. Like, how does that feel? Very specialized knowledge in this. It's kind of beyond Earth, like literally, right?
It is, and there's a lot of things about astronomy which you cannot possibly wrap your head around, even if you're in the business for a long time. I mean, some of the sizes and scales in the universe and are just incomprehensible for humans. So for me, it's great. I mean, I'm still passionate about so I was always an amateur astronomer, which means that on the cold nights I would actually be outside with a telescope. And so when I came here, the Cronin Observatory was available, and so I started going there. So I still do that. And you know, sometimes actually I now give people a tour, and you know, they pay some money for that. I'm like, it's crazy. Like I'm talking about my hobby. I'm talking about what I really enjoy doing, and because of that, I'm also interested in it. So that's how I know a lot of things, and I've studied it, and people would actually pay me to actually hear me talk about that. And for me, that's still completely unbelievable. And it's
Living a dream.
Yeah, I've always followed my passion, and the thing is, if you do that, it never costs a lot of effort. I mean, yes, it's working and it can be tiring and that sort of things, but you have this internal motivation to go, right? And so I've always been passionate about a lot of different things at the same time, and so you know, I wanted to do physics and astronomy, but also I played music, right? And so actually, when I was young, I played piano quite a lot. And so I recall at some point, like I realized I could also do university studies in music, and so that was a bit of a tough choice. I was as passionate about music as I was about astronomy, essentially, and so I just made a very conscious decision that, you know, if I would pick music as my profession, what are the odds to still do physics in your free time?
True.
You know, that's maybe a bit too geeky, right? Astronomy, maybe, sure, but and I thought the other way around. I mean, if I'm doing astronomy research and study physics, I can still play music, and I do. I still play. So it's a good thing if you find what you're passionate about in life, and you pursue that. But you have to do it, I think in a wise way, right? So at each point in this progress. So because each time I say, you know, it's like 2 more years and then I find a real job after that, I always was looking for like what could I do if I cannot find a position after this, and I would always have been okay with a different job, not just any job. I mean, I would be looking specifically for things. And so, for instance, when we were in California, we had very diverse seminars, right? So that NASA center is in Silicon Valley, in the heart of Silicon Valley, in Mountain View, where Google is located. So Google was our neighbor essentially. And so we got these very diverse people giving seminars. And so I remember at some point that there was a talk about the physics of skin and fur. And that was a talk done by a physicist at Pixar Animation Studios. And it was a physicist who essentially kind of developed the CGI for Monsters Inc. Like how
Wow.
should you model this in a computer? And nobody had really done this, right? And I think that was like a brilliant talk. So you can actually see, like, there's like surface tension involved in skin, and there's gravity, and if you don't balance those out properly, then all sorts of weird things happen. So and she could demonstrate that with like gag reels from Monsters Inc. And then around that time, they were actually looking for another physicist with scuba diving experience and experience in like ray tracing. So ray tracing is
that's so specific, like scuba diving and physicists. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't, I may not remember this perfectly, but they kind of, that's to me how it sounded like. And maybe that it's more like some affinity with underwater world or something, but essentially they were looking for somebody for Finding Nemo to kind of make sure that the lighting underwater was realistic.
I see.
So that would have been a job. If I would have gotten that job, I probably would have enjoyed that too. So, but I've always been able to follow my passion. I've always had like some backup plan, because when I got my physics degree, I had no backup plan, and like falling into that black hole where you're like, oh my God, what did I do, and what am I going to do with my life, and I'm lost and I'm doomed. And so I never wanted to get into that sort of position anymore. And so after that, I always made sure I had like some vague backup plan at least. And then it's great if you follow your passion. You're every day you wake up and you're doing something that you really enjoy and that you're really interested in, and it's the best motivation to get out of bed in the morning. So
wow. Last week we actually spoke to a career coach, and one thing he kind of brought up was how windy and like unpredictable the path to building your career can be. And I think your story is a great testament to that.
It's true. It depends a little bit also on what you want, right? I mean, if so, for instance, if I absolutely would have wanted to stay in Belgium, then the option was to pick a different career. And that's a bit the thing, right? You have to kind of make these choices in life. And I think when you're young, these choices are sometimes really hard, and you kind of can get the feeling that, oh my God, if I make the wrong choice, I'm my whole life is ruined. I think as you get a bit older, you actually realize like it's not that bad. I mean, if you make a choice and it turns out that it was not the best choice, then you make a different choice a bit later to kind of correct for it and go elsewhere. And the other thing is that you may not always kind of want to go in the same direction, right? The sort of things that I want in life now are different than what I wanted in life when I was 20 years old. And roughly, there's still a lot of the same direction, but a lot of the details are quite different now.
And I want to move away to teaching. When did you get into that? Like when moving to Western or before?
I've done some teaching before when I was a graduate student, and back then it was like specialized courses, parts of like graduate courses. But I really kind of started teaching much, actually undergraduate teaching, when I came to Western, so Western is unique in a lot of ways, and one of the ways that they're unique in is that they have this Center for Teaching and Learning. And so all faculty is strongly encouraged to take this course over the summer, which is about teaching at the university level. So the people that run the Center for Teaching and Learning are like the award-winning teachers. They're like absolutely amazing the teachers. And so you have this 1 week where you learn a lot of things, but also you can practice and try out a couple of things. And so the first year I was here, I actually didn't take that course. So I had 1 year of teaching, and then I took that course. And so that course actually taught me that a lot of things I had been doing that first year were just wrong. Were not great. Were not the best way to go about it. And so I started picking up things, and I started implementing all sorts of other techniques in the teaching, and learning about it. And having lots of discussions with my colleagues about like, how should we do this, and does this approach work, does this approach work? So and almost every year I make changes to the courses that I teach, just in hopes of improving actually the learning that the students can do. And it's not necessarily the case that I want the students to learn as much content as possible. I want them to actually get it's physics that I teach right now, and I want them to get to actually a deep understanding of the physics. And so that takes a while. It also takes like some hands-on trying out and working through problems and that sort of things. And how can we encourage that? And so yeah, I mean, over the years, I think I've changed very much how I see teaching, also what I've been teaching. And so in your academic career, one of the things you have to do is at some point when you go for tenure, for instance, you have to make a teaching dossier. And so, you're asked to not just say, what work have you done in terms of improving courses and that sort of things, but also you need a teaching philosophy. And so, you start thinking like how do I see teaching, and what's the importance of teaching? And so I did it when I went up for tenure in 2015, and I did it again when I went up for promotion a few years ago. And so I was like, wait a minute, in those, like, what is it, 5 years or something, my view on teaching has changed a lot. And so my teaching philosophy now is actually quite different than what it was, even in 2015. So, and yeah, and so what I try to do is so for me, kind of teaching is probably the most important thing that I do. And I say that not not randomly. This is a question that I had to ask myself a while ago, and so this is going to take a while, but I'm going to get back to this point here. So in 2013, I at some point realized that I was not very happy, and it wasn't necessarily clear why. I mean, sure, there was lots of stress and that sort of things involved. But I always have this feeling like I want to do research and I can't because I have to do teaching. And I'm sure it's something that you've heard from from other
Read it a lot, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was there, and I had these research projects, and we were scooped a couple of times just because we couldn't spend enough time on the research. And so you do a half-baked job in the research, you do a half-baked job in teaching, and overall you're not really happy. And at the same time, so I think the most important figure in my life, in kind of determining my life, was actually my dad. So my dad was my physics teacher in high school, and so he introduced me to astronomy essentially, but he also he stimulated my curiosity, and sometimes at his own expense, right? So I remember at some point when I was a kid, he brought home like a giant strong bar magnet, which I then wanted to try out on everything, including on our newly bought TV.
No.
So we didn't have like a properly working TV after that anymore. With like this. So
how did he respond to that?
Well, I mean, actually, in an amazing way, because he realized that what I was doing was just being an explorer, which is exactly what he wanted to stimulate in a sense. But he wanted me to be smarter about it and sometimes think a little bit before doing something. So I mean, he was good about it, and I mean there were a few more examples like that. But so he stimulated me. I always would talk to my dad about my research and that sort of thing as well. But then he got sick, and so in 2014 he actually passed away. And so in the last year of his life, he not willingly, kind of very unconsciously, he kind of made me realize, like, he was sick and a lot of things were taken away from him, but he was happy and he was grateful. And so it made me realize, like, why am I complaining, right? I mean, I have essentially everything that I wanted to have in terms of a job. I'm doing astronomy, for crying out loud, and so why am I not happy? And so, he died, and shortly after that, we had our first sabbatical. So the sabbatical, you don't take holidays necessarily, but essentially you spend a year without teaching and without service. So it's full-time research. But I wanted to use that time as well to kind of reflect on this and kind of ask myself, like, why are you not happy, and try to align is what you want in life. And so after thinking about this for a long time, I came to this conclusion that this whole conflict between research and teaching was what was making me unhappy. And it's conflict where I don't think there should have been a conflict necessarily, because I'm also an idealist, right? And I feel like things need to change in this world, right? This world needs to be a better place, and there's all sorts of problems and we need to fix them. Now, am I necessarily the best person to solve all of these problems? Well, not necessarily. But what I can do is I can actually, through teaching, I can actually train the next generation of students that will contain a lot of people that can actually actively work on a lot of these problems and solving. So it's like this saying that teachers change the world like one student at a time. And so in 2014, that's essentially what I started realizing, that the best way that I can make this world a better place is by making students that actually have more skills in problem solving, that understands like rational thought, and I can teach that through physics. Physics is in many ways an ideal course or an ideal field to kind of teach those things. And so for me, that actually was a big change, because once I could for myself say, like, okay, so teaching is for me personally an important thing in what I want to do with my life, it's okay to spend time on it. And so now I do spend time on teaching, like this term, certainly, as all my time I spend on teaching. So that means I'm not doing any research. I do my research then in the summer. So I spend far less time on research, but that's okay, because at least I know, or I understand now that what I do for teaching is at least, well, it's actually more important than the research that I do. I might enjoy the research when I'm all by myself. I might enjoy doing research more than actually doing the teaching, but I get a lot of the fulfillment I actually get from realizing that the teaching will actually make a difference in this world.
And it's so many
wow.
students that take those physics classes too, when you think about it. So it's a lot of potential.
Yes, it's a lot of potential. It's also a lot of potential for unhappy students. It's
Very
a
good point.
it's a thing. Nobody, a lot of people don't like physics for some reason, and I don't necessarily know why. And so I understand that physics is difficult for a lot of people, but I think a lot of students mistakenly think that what's difficult about physics is the math, and it's not really the math that most students actually struggle with. What they struggle with is that they have misconceptions, and it's really hard to get over those misconceptions. And even if I show students, like, hey, this is a common misconception, but you can actually see that it is a misconception, this is how it really works, that doesn't solve the fact that they have these misconceptions. It's really hard to get rid of those. And so students need to kind of take actions themselves to kind of get rid of it. And that's work. It requires an effort, and it requires kind of so if we get a little bit philosophical in this present day and age, if you kind of look at what's going on with a lot of people that kind of believe in conspiracy theories, or like anti-vax people, what's kind of the root thing that is the conflict, is that we actually say, like, what, you should do all your policies and whatever you should do on a rational basis, which means you have to understand how things work. You have to base your decisions on facts. Whereas I think a lot of the people that oppose those are more like, well, we want to follow our intuition. Like, this doesn't feel right, and that's a big conflict. And so I see this in students as well. You come in to a physics course, and you come in with certain misconceptions, and intuitively those misconceptions actually feel right. And that's the conflict, right? So if you want to get rid of those misconceptions, what you have to do is kind of recalibrate what your intuition actually is. You have to recalibrate your intuition based on things that you can rationally deduce. And again, that takes work. But if you do it
Right.
and you get to that, you gain so much insight into how things actually work that I think it's absolutely worth it. And so that's essentially what I try to do, right? I mean, I don't expect that the students that I teach physics now, that they will remember the physics 5 years from now. And if they don't, that's totally okay with me. But what we will need to kind of solve these grand challenges that we have in our society, right? We're going to need a lot of brain power. We're going to need a lot of teamwork. We're going to have lots of empathy for understanding each other, and a lot of hard work from people to actually solve these problems. And so, what I hope to achieve is that through the teaching, or through kind of bringing things to a course that focus not on the mathematics, but that focus on like these is how these things actually work. That I can inspire at least a fraction of the students to see that their potential, and that's a bit the thing, right? If you come into a physics course and you say like, oh, physics, it's not my thing, I can do it, I'm not good with math, then that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You will always be right, because you're never going to do the effort to actually get better at physics. And so students that come in like that, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do for you, really nothing, because you're working against it, right? But if you're coming in and you're like, well, I mean, I'm not good at physics and I have a hard time kind of getting it, but I'm willing to work on changing my perspective and making sure that I develop that potential. You get so much better at problem solving, and those are things you can use in everyday life, in the physics context too. So and it's so for me that's the key thing, right? It's going beyond the physics, using the physics to actually train things that are, say, much more fundamental than the physics itself. So, and Einstein already famously said this, right? He's like, the value of an education is not the learning of many facts, because you can do that just from going to the library or something, but is a training of the mind to think something that cannot be learned from a textbook, right? So the moniker is like, education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned in school. And that's, I think, for me, what the importance is for physics. And so what it means is, in physics, I have to get these first year students, I have to get them out of their comfort zone, because their comfort zone is where all the misconceptions live.
Right.
So students that are willing
sense.
to say, like, I'll follow you for just a bit. I want to be able to go back. I'll follow you for just a bit, just to see what's on the other side of the hill. Come out of the comfort zone and learn critical thinking and problem solving skills. I mean, think about it. If you are gifted with problem solving skills and recognizing information from misinformation, you can make so many better decisions in all sorts of areas of life. And that's what I hope to achieve. So
I'm not gonna lie, now that I look back at, like, I was in first year physics as well, and I didn't enjoy it. I was one of those kids. But I, like, now that I don't remember most of, like, honestly, the concepts, the math of it. But it was always like the challenge to just like figure out what the solution is. It wasn't the most fun to like actually do it, but then when you do it afterwards, it just feels so, like, I don't know, it's just so fulfilling, because like you solve this problem,
yeah, and you gain insights in the process, right? So so this morning I was talking about circuits, right? And so circuits, you can have resistors in series, you can have resistors in parallel, and that makes a big difference for what current you draw from the battery. And it's one of those concepts which is a big misconceptions. So a lot of students say, oh, if you have like a 9 volts battery, it's always going to produce the same current. Well, it does not. The current that it produces depends on what circuits you connect it to. And that insight, a lot of the students don't have. And so by actually letting them work through, like, well, calculate it for 2 in series, calculate for 2, what comes out, they're like, wait a minute, there must be a mistake here. Like, no, there's no mistake. The mistake is in your preconceived notion.
Right.
So if they get to that point, they're not going to forget that anymore. Right? And then
there's actually,
sorry, go ahead.
There's this really interesting story I read in a book, and it described someone walking through the desert, and they're very like thirsty, and they're starting to kind of feel faint. And so as they're walking, they see a snake on the desert floor, and they think, oh my gosh, this is it. My life is over. I'm about to get killed by this snake. And as they're just like in pure despair, the clouds kind of shift over a little, and they realize that the snake is actually just a rope. And so they start laughing hysterically, just like, "Oh, I was so scared." And then someone else passes by and they start freaking out, thinking it's a snake again. And the person can't do anything but laugh because now they can't unsee what they've seen. And that kind of reminds me of what you said with, like, once you kind of break through those misconceptions, it does kind of create a new pathway in your thinking.
Yeah, it is, and so I mean, I've taught this course several times now, so I kind of understand most of what I teach, right? How it should be. But we use new textbook this year, and so it's all new problems, right? And so you know, students will come to me with problems that I have never seen before.
Mhm.
And you know, as a student, you're like, oh, nervous, am I going to be able to do that? I'm not nervous anymore about this, right? Because I know it's going to be a new problem, and so maybe I'll need some time to kind of think about like how what is this problem really asking about. But I'm not concerned. I'll be able to figure it out eventually, and that's because I know I don't need to use my intuition necessarily for that, right? In some cases, it's obvious now because I've done so many different circuits that in some cases I immediately know, like, okay, yeah, this is blah blah blah. But in other cases, it's not obvious for me either, right? And so what I know is that I have learned through the years, like there's just a set of steps to follow, kind of a chain of logic to follow, and if you follow that logic, then you'll get there eventually. And it may mean that in the process you actually kind of get again an insight that's going to stay with you for the rest of your life. And you get that insight not because somebody's telling you, you get it because you're working out, like, oh, this must be so, like, oh, wait a minute, that means that's, and that insight that you develop yourself based on kind of following like this scientific rigor, that insight you never forget anymore.
You were a professor of mine first year, and I guess I want to just share a bit of gratitude. I'm so glad that you're in the position you're in because I think the mission that you're on is very inspiring. And yeah, I guess like students and professors don't get to engage in this manner super often, but I think when it does happen, it's purely, it's like magic. It's very magical. So yeah, thank you for all the work you've done and all the, like, the vision you have for the future.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. One of the things that I've noticed is that there's lots of students don't trust their professors in first year.
That's true.
This is something that actually in the pandemic became clear. At some point, I was in like a first year meet and greet, and one of the questions was like, what did the professors actually, what did your teachers actually say about professors? And you know, the answer was like, oh, they don't care. They're going to try to fail you. They're going to dock marks for everything. Like, really? I mean, no, that's not what we do. So I enjoy the sort of conversations, but so when I talk to first year students in particular, they often just flat out don't believe me. And if I say like, look, and you know, of course, occasionally, you know, I'm a human being as well, so I make mistakes, right? And so it happens that I say something that turns out to be a mistake, and then of course that's a reason for mistrust, right? Oh, he lied to us. Oh, I didn't lie to you. I made a mistake. And so it takes a while, I guess, to build up that trust as well. In upper years, actually, I think it's much better. But there's
yeah, now like honestly, like I would ask my profs for like anything, but in first year, I definitely felt that. Like I don't know why, but there was like this tension between students and like profs that like they were on like rivals or something. But like I just like I look back at it, I'm like, what was the reason? They like all the profs are just trying to teach and like help you out. They're not trying to like fail you or anything.
I believe there might be a lack of humility, honestly. At least for myself, I've recognized how much I don't know as I've grown. And I think maybe it was some level of arrogance or lack of humility being younger. Yeah, like one question I did have for you, Professor. So one thing in regards to what we're talking about, like, could it possibly be this like stressor of achieving marks and not necessarily like the focus on the process of learning that could contribute to this? Like, do you have anything to say maybe on the state of how education works or anything kind of like experienced throughout your career?
Yeah, so the first thing I should say is that the way the system is now is very different from how it was in Belgium when I was a student. So we had, I think, 10 or 12 courses in our first year and second year. We had courses in the fall term and in the winter term. but we had no quizzes, we had no assignments, we had no midterm exams or nothing. So we had 100% of a course mark was on the final exam, and all final exams were essentially in June. So it does give you a lot of freedom early in the academic year. And I mean, we have used that to throw an occasional party, so to speak, because you can, right? I mean, you're not missing any deadlines. It also gives you more time to process things and kind of learn, right? So if you go through problem solving in the term, some things just take a time before they kind of sink in. So you had the time if you wanted. So it worked well for me. I mean, the exams were hard. Don't get me wrong. It was typically all our exams were oral exams. So you would get 3 questions. You would get like a few hours to prepare a written answer. And then you would go with that written answer to the prof. He would go over it and would start asking you all sorts of questions in addition about some assumptions you made, or until essentially they found questions to which you had no answer. And so we throughout the year did not have a lot of stress. All we had to do is figure out where we had to be at what time for which course. We had to do labs, and that was it. And so now it's completely opposite. Like at any given time, students have like all these deadlines. There's for each course, there's assignments and quizzes and midterms, and I mean, so it's a non-stop, stressful opportunity, right? And so if you have a quiz which isn't worth a lot of marks, you're still going to stress out over it.
Right.
So I think in that sense, students now have, say, more continuous source of stress than what we did. I think it's also leading to more issues with mental health. And I think this pandemic has really showed us the importance of in-person instruction and interactions for mental health as well. And so I think that's one of the things that we will get better at, kind of recognizing the importance of mental health, because only a healthy student can be a good student, right? So yes, I think students have a lot of stress going on, and one of the concerns that I have is that I see that students are gaming their education, right? So at any given time, they're looking like what do I have in front of me? Oh, that quiz is worth 5 marks. That's where like, okay, I'm going to pick this one.
Right.
And I kind of understand the students will say like, well, it's because I cannot do everything. And that may be true given time management skills and that sort of things, but that's not how it should be. That's really concerning to me, because essentially what it means is that you miss part of the course material that you may actually need later in your education. So if you have to feel that you have to sacrifice your learning in one course for essentially doing well in another course, then something's not right. And that's a concern. I also have a concern that a lot of the students no, there's a fraction of the students that I see in first year that are not really interested in learning. And that's the other thing, right? If you come to university, maybe you just come here because you want to get a degree, because there's so many jobs for which you need a degree. Yeah. But the reason why those jobs require that degree is essentially because they want you to learn certain things, and they want to see that you are actually capable of learning things that are out of your comfort zone as well. And so you have to, as a student, you have to embrace the whole idea of learning in the first place. And again, if you do that, if you like learning, then university is fantastic. It's the best time of your life because there are so many things to learn. Right. But if you don't, then you have to ask yourself, like, what are you doing here? It's unfortunate, right? If you're at the university and you're not interested in learning. And so to come back to your point about the stress, like, yes, I see that there's a lot of stress. Is there something you can do about it? Well, I mean, I was actually reading some of the feedback of the students on midterm exam that we had last week, and so one of the things is like, oh, you should kind of make sure your exam is scheduled better, that it conflicts less with other courses. We have no choice. So we started planning our midterm exams in September, and yes, we talked to chemistry and biology, and we kind of figure out when they have their labs and when they have their midterm exams. And there was exactly one slot that was available for us to put our exam without conflicting with anything else, and that's the slot that we picked. And that shows me that there's a big problem, because it essentially means that every possible weekend there is some exam of some sort, and not just one.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's too much. And then in between the exams, there's quizzes and that sort of things. And so, I mean, I'm part of that, right? I mean, I do a midterm because I think the students need it, and it's good for the students. But also this year in this term, I do a quiz every week. Now, I call it the Quizlet. It's 5 questions. It's 5 conceptual questions. And so essentially, if you understand the course material, you will get those questions mostly right. And half of the marks is essentially for participation, the other half is for getting the mark right. So if you get 0 answers correctly for the entire term, you lose, I think, 4% of your final mark or something. So it's an opportunity to actually test yourself, like, how is my understanding without having to study very hard for it. So I was hoping that this would not lead to a lot of stress on the students. Whether that's been a success or not, I'll have to find out. But
Okay.
But I think that's a problem. I just don't know how to solve that, because there should be some middle ground where you're not swamped with all sorts of deadlines that you need to do, which is difficult because there are so many different courses, and all the profs have kind of their own, like, oh, we need to do this and we need to do that. So one of the things that I introduced with some of the assignments, for instance, is that they don't have a due date; they have a best before date. And so it's like this assignment covers this course material, so ideally you do it by this date. But if you can't, you're not going to lose any marks as long as you've done it before the term, right? And for a lot
Is this the first time you're doing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that's because I think there's too much stress for unnecessary reasons, essentially. But I cannot do much about like midterms and that sort of thing, right? And because all the other courses are doing this, if I wouldn't do any quizzes or exams or assignments, the students wouldn't spend time on this course. And so that's the whole paradoxical thing.
That's very true. Yeah.
So if I want the students to spend time on my course, I have to put in certain components which are worth marks. Otherwise, they won't do it. And so by doing it, I'm doing them a favor because they're going to be spending time on the course, but I'm doing them, a disfavor by essentially putting more stress on them. And so it's a catch-22 situation to which I have not found a solution yet.
I talked to another prof like way back, and she was saying that these like low stake like assignments kind of things are supposed to like take the stress away from like big midterms and big exams. But now you're saying that because it added up so much, now these small things are what's causing stress. So it's just.
Well, I don't know. So I don't know whether my Quizlets are causing my students a lot of stress. So, I mean, on Friday, I'll do actually a survey of the class to kind of see how they feel about that. So I don't know. I hope it takes away some of the stress. And it's purely conceptual, so you don't have to do any problem solving. So it's really like, have you followed the course material and can you reason through it? So in principle, if they just attend classes, they should be able to actually get it. If they understand what's being said in class, then they should be able to do those questions as well. So I would hope that takes away stress, but maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's honorable, like all the attempts you're making to kind of try to improve this situation, but it seems like it does need a unified kind of like attack, I guess, from like the whole university. Because I think you brought up a very great point. I never noticed this, but I guess that is very true. There's not a lot of as much focus on the learning if you're just in this constant rat race of like completing assignments and showing that you've learned something. Because I've definitely fallen into that hole of gamifying the system, that like, how do I maximize the output on these assessments? And I've had to recognize that doesn't actually maximize my learning. I don't actually know what I'm learning doing it that way.
No, and so my ideal, what I think now might be the ideal situation is so like in my course I think I have 6 units, right? So it's or something like so essentially I have a chapter. It has a certain amount of content. So there's lecture videos online about it. There's problems they can do. I do some in class. There's assignments. I have these Quizlets with conceptual questions. so they have everything that they need to actually process the material and learn everything that they need to learn. I don't care when a student gets to that point, whether that's like the second week of January or the third week of March. For me, makes like no difference whatsoever. Right? So I would actually say for each of the units that I have, once you're ready, go to the exam building. If only we would have an exam building, right? Go to the exam building, and there you can actually take the exam.
And that's how a lot of professional certificates work as well, right?
It would be great, but of course there's a lot of concerns for like exam integrity, right? And so like on Friday we had our midterm exam. And we find that the questions that we wrote for the midterm exam, which take actually quite some time, are already available on the internet with answers. So
yeah, I've heard that's a big problem. Integrity is like the problem to solve in this digital age.
Well, but so again, if you have an exam building, you kind of know that this is what you actually set up. So what I can do is I can actually come up. I can make a computerized exam which is based on, I don't know, a few hundred questions, and you get like 10 random questions, and you solve them. They will be randomly picked from the different topics, and they will test different learning outcomes, and I can make sure that in an exam building you have no access to the internet, for instance. So something like that I think would be ideal, because then there are students that can, they just want to do things chapter by chapter. So for each chapter you go and do the tests, and great if you pass the test, and then maybe there's just one exam or something at the end. So I think that's ideal, because you do everything at your own pace in principle, if you want. But it's not how it is, unfortunately.
A long way to go, yeah.
I was gonna say you're already in a lot of different great roles, and I hope you continue doing this great work. That's an idea I've never ever heard, and I think it's a very well thought out idea. Hopefully we can have more incredible smart people like yourself come together and kind of tackle this issue.
It's not a new idea from myself. It's actually something I heard from other. There are actually universities where they have exam buildings.
Okay.
It's definitely new to us though, because it's always like the same deadline kind of format that we followed. So
yeah, it's the easiest thing to do, right? So.
Well, Professor Cami, I'm sure if we had the opportunity, we would love to keep hearing all your stories. I know you mentioned some trips to Africa where you saw like the solar eclipse. So I'm sure we have many other things to discuss, but I guess this was an amazing talk. Thank you for your time. And do you have any final words for our viewers?
Well, thanks for having me. And I'm happy to talk anytime. Well, so, aim to enjoy learning, and see your time in university as essentially a time where you can focus on developing who you are and who you want to be, and how to become the better version of who you are. And I mean, that's something that goes on throughout life, right? I mean, you have a lot of people around you that can help you, not just professors, but also you can learn so much from your own friends, and from listening to each other's perspectives, not just about course content, but also like views on life and politics and whatnot. And I think your time at the university is, in that sense, I think the most valuable time in your entire life. And so you have to use it. And of course, not being in person has hindered that enormously. But yeah, I hope going back in person, that's something that we can all enjoy a bit more in the future.